Welcome back to this flesh-eating bacteria virus in the waters. Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover Warren 20 here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for the third installment of a series that I reviewed back in June, and I kind of took a bit of a break from because of plenty of other stuff I had to review and do. But now I decided to finally finish up this series before I start my Christmas stuff and everything. I decided to finish up some franchises, and this week it's going to be finishing up the two Cabin Fever movies, and then I'm hopefully going to try to finish up the Die Hard series, and then review Ghostbusters Afterlife, but kicking off this week, let's finish off the last two Cabin Fever movies we gotta get through. And I gotta tell you, now let's recap this. When I started the series in June, I reviewed the first Cabin Fever movie, and let me tell you this. The first Cabin Fever, I thought was pretty good. It's not a masterpiece like some people seem to claim it is, but by any means, but it's definitely this decent horror film that seems like is pretty much a good parody and throwback to all those cheesily bad epidemic outbreak horror films, or just a good little throwback to other certain great masterpiece horror films like Night of the Living Dead, The Evil Dead, or all those cabin horror movies, or all those outbreak horror movies we all know and love in filmmaking. It was a good launch to Eli Roth's career. Although, yeah, even if he's not the best director because he has problems kind of like Rob Zombie, Eli Roth kind of makes some really trashy, annoying, immature, childish characters as his protagonists in horror movies, but thankfully that trope is actually pretty funny in this movie because I think the characters were kind of meant to be unlikable. I don't think you were really supposed to like them. They're kind of meant to be little throwbacks to all those douchey horror movie characters, so plus it's kind of a parody horror movie, so this, and then came Cabin Fever 2 Spring Fever, made 7 years too late, and I reviewed that about, I think, a day or two after I reviewed Cabin Fever 1. And let me tell you something, Spring Fever was abysmal. It felt about as trashy as a Rob Zombie movie, except even more horribly made and cheaply made than those. That literally felt like something, seriously, Cabin Fever 2 felt like something that you'd find in a dollar store at Dollarama. No, Dollar Tree, or in the bargain bin at Walmart. It was that bad. Probably one of the worst horror sequels to ever exist. And yes, I know about the studio interference with Ty West, guys, but however, and then of course around 2014, they somehow decided it'd be okay, despite Spring Fever's bad results, to make a third Cabin Fever movie. Yeah, as if one bad sequel wasn't enough. Let's make another one of these shitters. However, I finally got around to watching it months later. The reason why I didn't review Spring Patients Zero right away is because Spring Fever made me not want to check out the rest of the series. I decided to almost cancel reviewing the rest of these, but I finally decided to finish reviewing the series, and I gotta say, Patient Zero actually is still bad, but it's slightly better than Spring Fever. Because what the second film lacked, this new one kind of does bring back a little bit. I will say this film's kind of brought back some of the disturbing horror feel the first one had. Well, the first one still had some cheesy comedy in there, but it was kind of balanced between serious when it needed to be and comedy when it needed to be. But however, the only problem is that this movie did it in so many wrong ways. Like the gory fight scenes was just a little bit way over the top. However, once again, it was still better than Spring Fever. It wasn't nearly as badly made as Spring Fever because Cabin Fever 2 Spring Fever annoyed the shit out of me with how terrible that movie was. This one is actually a little bit better. The characters are a little better. They're not nearly as annoying as the ones in Cabin Fever 2 were. And they're actually a little more they're still unlikable in this, but they're a little more mature in this movie compared to the characters in the first two. And also, what's better? There is thankfully no party cop in this movie. Since this is a prequel, which is a good thing because while I know some people do like Winston the party man, he's probably the most irritatingly unlikable character in those first two movies that I don't ever want to see succeed. I don't ever want to see win. But in both movies, he always wins in the end. He ends up killing the world with his stupidity. So I'm glad he is so not in this one. So, and if those who do hate the party cop, you'll be happy to hear that news. But the third Cabin Fever opens with much confusion. Like cameras and characters wobble and walk around. We see there is a blood. It doesn't make much sense, but we do learn Sean Astin is the title's patient zero. Come on, man. I don't know why they got Samwise Gamgee to play in this directed DVD stuff. And maybe uniquely distasteful in the movie's flesh-eating monster. Like, well, then again, after like Lord of the Rings, Sean Astin kind of wasn't really getting a lot of otherwise wise movie decisions for his career. Like, it's like he didn't really make much else Oscar worthy since Lord of the Rings. Poor guy. He really deserved better after Samwise Gamgee. Some guys have all the luck. Some guys have all the luck. And also note, our cabin in this movie is really an island. Yeah, like, seriously, why are these follow-ups even called Cabin Fever? There's no cabin in any of these follow-ups. There's only a cabin in the first one. They should have renamed Spring Fever School Fever and renamed this movie Island Fever because this one is on an island this time. Now, parallel story kind of begins, which kind of makes more sense. There are because in this one, three buddies and a beautiful dark-haired young woman take a boat to this island for this bachelor party, I think, and the leading man is among the boating quartet, tall blonde Mitch Ryan, and his buddies are muscular brother Brando Eaton and fun-loving best friend Ryan Donahue, whose characters' names are Josh, Marcus, and Dobbs. And the pretty girl is Jillian Murray, whose character's named Penny, and stuff. And yes, guys, for those who love nudity, there is this really nasty, gory scene where bikini comes off quickly, but it's not really supposed to be a attractive scene. It's kind of more of a gory, nasty scene. But I will admit, like, there's a good qualities. The gore in this is pretty good. I mean, I kind of like how this movie isn't too obvious of a prequel. You can kind of appreciate this movie on its own, and Sean Astin does give him, and despite getting little stuff, and Sean Astin actually does have a pretty good performance in this. He's probably the best part of this movie. I mean, but man, like, come on, after his success with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, he hardly got any good roles. It's like Hollywood didn't even recognize his. I really wish Hollywood recognized his performance as Sam in the Lord of the Rings movies more, and he probably would have got way better career roles instead of just directed DVD trash sequels or more goofy Adam Sandler films. Although at least those Adam Sandler films were actually some of Adam Sandler's best, but which were 50 First Dates and Click. And those were some of his best ones. But back to this, like, and of course, and I kind of like how there's actually no comedy in this one. This one they still try to be a serious horror movie this time because the comedy for me only worked in the first one because the first one kind of wasn't supposed to be a serious horror movie. You kind of weren't supposed to take it seriously, since none of the stuff in the first one would happen in real life. I mean, but Spring Fever literally tried to do that so bad and it failed miserably. And the first scenes with Mr. Ryan and his friends are better than the stuff with Mr. Austin on the island, although they do not contain any special effects. And while the overall story simply does not engage, the makeup and gore effects are a relative strength, and the highlight is a knockdown, drag-out fight between two half-flesh-eating young women. Which is that gory fight, which kind of gets a little over the top, but it's still pretty cool. it's still kind of a decent fight, and the plot eventually does make more sense, but it's difficult to stay focused on the details. Because, like, honestly, just in the end, Eli Roth's original Cabin Fever, the first one, stuck in a funny thing and worked out surprisingly well. As much as that did, Cabin Fever, the first one, really only worked better as just a standalone movie. It didn't need a sequel. It shouldn't have been a franchise to begin with. Period. But this edition, which is directed by Carl Andrews, has no comic relief, like I've said, or more accurately, there's like no humor that works like humor in this one, which I did kind of like. I did kind of like they didn't try to be humorous this time around, like it was around. I think maybe they like recognized the bad stuff of the previous film and decided to finally ditch the comedy elements for this one. And the storyline is really confusing, but it's kind of like something out of a Resident Evil game. Now, I don't really play Resident Evil, but for those of you who do play Resident Evil, that might probably work. A film like this might probably work if you love the Resident Evil games. Kind of a better Resident. In fact, I think it's kind of a somewhat better Resident Evil story than the Resident Evil movies we have. But in the end, I still think this was a pretty bad movie. There's not a lot of good things I can say about this film. I guess maybe it's worth a watch if you're bored, but it's not something you should really go out of your way to watch. And honestly, I'd only just stick with the first one because that's pretty much the only good one in this dreaded series. But that's kind of just my opinion. So once again, better than the last time, but still not enough. And here's how I'm going to rank this movie. I am going to give Cabin Fever Patient Zero a 3 out of 10. Well, we just covered the original 3 movies now. I think we all know what's left. Only one more movie to go, and that is none other than... Oh, no. We all know what's left. It's the goddamn remake. Great. Looks like I'm going to have to be the newest horror YouTube critic this dreaded remake is going to claim next. Oh, great. Looks like I gotta sit through this trashy remake now. I gotta go. Well, I'm actually about to go watch the dreaded remake after I finish this video. But at least it's the last one I'll have to do, and hopefully it's the last Cabin Fever movie we'll ever get. Let's pray they don't make a 5th. But anyway, that'll be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, then don't forget to like, subscribe to Movie Lover 120.